The storm before the silence, Seth rain had started hours ago. Heavy, slow, unforgiving. Sundar sat by the tall window in his Mountain View office, watching each drop streak across the glass like time passing in slow motion. Outside, the sky was gray, a mirror of the thoughts inside his mind. The world knew him as the calm, soft-spoken CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world. They saw the interviews, the keynote speeches, the calculated poise. But, right, now, in the silence of his office, Sundar was just a man caught between two worlds. God, it had been a long day. Not unusual in the life of a CEO. But this one had been different. Hours earlier, he sat across from the board of directors in a meeting that had begun with charts and ended in cold silence. Google was facing unexpected pressure, not just from competitors, but from internal fractures that no one outside the walls of the company knew about. Departments weren't just disagreeing, they were tearing each other apart. Innovation had slowed. Some believed Sundar's leadership had grown too cautious. Others thought he wasn't listening anymore. The board had presented him with a proposal, not an ultimatum, they said, though it felt like one. They wanted to pivot hard, fast, restructure teams, lay off people, bring in someone else to complement him. In other words, share his power. A masked way of saying, we might not need you at the top much longer. He had nodded politely, giving nothing away. But inside, something cracked as he drove home that night. The world blurred outside the windshield. Traffic lights shimmered through the rain. The wipers whispered secrets he didn't want to hear. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. 14 missed calls. All from his wife, Anjali. And one message. Come home quickly. It's about Kavya. His fingers trembled as he tapped the message open, but it offered no more detail. He had left early that morning before anyone else woke up, something he'd done more often than he liked to admit. Kavya, his 14-year-old daughter, had been distant lately, not angry, not rebellious, just quiet. And Sundar, in the noise of his world, hadn't asked why. Hadn't had the time dot when he walked through the front door. The house was still. No dinner smells, no footsteps. Just Anjali standing near the hallway, her eyes swollen, her arms folded like she was holding herself together. She didn't go to school, she said. She barely spoke all day. Then I found something in her room. Sundar, I think she's hurting. I think she's really hurting, and I don't know how long it's been. He felt a strange rush-like guilt wrapped in confusion. How had he missed this? How had the man who led thousands who read markets and futures failed to see the signs? And his own daughter? He walked upstairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Kavya's door was slightly open. Inside, she sat by her desk, her headphones on, staring blankly at a notebook. The moment he stepped in, she looked up. Her eyes didn't hold anger. They held distance, as if he were a stranger interrupting a dream. Sorry, he said softly. I should have come home earlier. She didn't speak. Just turned the page in her notebook. He sat on the floor, unsure of how to begin. Words had always been his strength, but now they felt clumsy. I saw your sketchbook last week, he said. You drew the old banyan tree near our house in Chennai. I loved it. For a second, her lips twitched, almost a smile. Then it faded. I feel like I don't exist anymore, she whispered. Not at school. Not here. I try to talk to Mom, but she's always busy with Naina. And you ... you're always working. I didn't think anyone would notice if I disappeared. Those words hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever could. He wanted to speak, to tell her she meant everything, to say sorry for the 1,000 missed dinners, the canceled vacations, the evenings he chose emails over bedtime stories. But the words jammed in his throat. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. A calendar reminder. Emergency board follow-up call at 9 p.m. Mandatory attendance. He looked at his daughter. Then at the door. The decision forming was small at first, like a ripple, but it grew, fast and loud. I'm staying right here tonight, he said. No meetings, no calls, just you and me. Kavya looked at him, surprised, maybe even suspicious. And then, for the first time in months, she nodded. But the story doesn't end here. Later that night, as Sundar sat in the dark next to her room, his phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't from the board. It was from a journalist he trusted. The message read, "Someone is leaking internal emails. Your leadership might be under direct attack. Call me ASAP." He stared at the screen, torn, just when he thought he had made his choice. The past came chasing. And then came the second message. This one anonymous. "Choose wisely, Sundar. You can't save both." Shadows in the glass. The night was deeper than usual. Quiet, heavy, almost like it was holding its breath. Sundar sat alone in the hallway outside his daughter's room. The warm yellow light spilling under her door was the only glow in the house. Somewhere inside, Kavya had finally fallen asleep. Her breathing was soft and steady now, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he had helped bring her peace. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt fear. His phone screen still glowed in his hand. The two messages stared back at him, one from a trusted journalist, the other anonymous and chilling. "Choose wisely, Sundar. You can't save both." He read the line again and again, trying to push away the meaning that kept creeping in. Was it a threat, a warning, or just someone playing games at the worst possible time? He stood up slowly and walked to the living room. The walls of his house had never felt so unfamiliar. Every picture frame, every piece of furniture looked like it belonged to a version of life he had slowly drifted away from. There was one photo on the wall that made him pause. It was an old one. The day they had moved to the US and Anjali holding baby Kavya. And Sundar behind them, a suitcase in one hand and a smile that believed anything was possible. He looked younger, freer. The weight that now bent his shoulders wasn't there yet. He sat down on a couch and dialed the journalist. "This is unusual for you," Sundar said quietly when the line connected. "Messaging me this late? What do you know?" The voice on the other end belonged to an old friend, someone who had never chased a story for clicks. She didn't waste time. "Someone's been feeding sensitive company documents to a competitor," she said. "Emails, internal strategy drafts, meeting logs. And your name keeps showing up. I don't think it's about you, but the timing is suspicious. It looks like they're building a case to push you out." Sundar rubbed his forehead. "Who's behind it? I don't know yet. But someone on the inside wants this to look like you're losing control, and with the restructuring talks, it could tip things against you." He didn't respond right away. His mind was already calculating every possibility. Who in his trusted circle would do this? Who had the access and the motive? "Thank you," he said finally, and ended the call. I entered the room a moment later. Her face was tired, but her eyes still held the fire he'd always admired. She sat beside him without asking anything at first, just leaned against him. Gently. "How is she?" Sundar asked. "Asleep. But it's not just tonight, Sundar. It's been months. She misses you. She's been slowly disappearing into her own silence, and I didn't see it because I was so busy trying to hold everything else together." He nodded, the guilt thick in his chest. "I know," he said, "and now it's all falling apart. The company, home, everything I thought I was managing. I think I was just surviving." Anjali looked at him carefully. "What are you going to do?" It was the question he'd been avoiding, but now it stood in front of him like a wall. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "There's pressure from the board. Someone's sabotaging me. But tonight, Kavya needed me, and I almost missed it because I was ready to go back to another meeting. She didn't answer. She didn't need to." The silence between them said it all. But before they could speak again, a sudden knock came at the door. 3 soft raps, then silence. They both froze. It was nearly midnight. No one should be visiting. Sundar stood up cautiously and moved to the door. He peered through the peephole, but there was no one there. Only the shadow of the rain under the porch light. He opened the door slowly and found a plain manila envelope lying on the doorstep. No name. No return address. He brought it inside and opened it on the dining table. Inside were printed pages, Lots of them. Email threads. Meeting transcripts. Financial documents marked confidential. And at the very top, his own digital signature on a strategy plan he had never approved. Someone had forged it. Someone was framing him. He looked up at Anjali, his hand shaking slightly. This ... this could destroy everything. And then his phone rang again. A name appeared on the screen that stopped his breath. Rajesh Gupta, a former colleague, a friend once, now a powerful executive in a rival firm, and someone who had always believed Sundar stood in his way. He answered. You got the package, Rajesh said calmly. No greeting, no small talk. What do you want? Sundar asked, voice low. I want you to step down. Not now. Not suddenly. Do it quietly. With grace. Say it's for personal reasons. I'll help make sure your legacy stays clean. Your family doesn't need to suffer the mess. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you a way out. You're smart, Sundar. But even smart men get tired. Go be with your family. It's what you always said you cared about. Why now? Because the game has changed. And you're no longer the player. You're the piece. The line went dead. Sundar stood there, the words echoing in his ears. You're the piece. He looked back at the envelope. Then up the stairs toward his daughter's room. He was caught in a storm not of his making, but he still had one power left. The power to choose. But which cost was he willing to pay? As he stood there, the lights flickered once, then again. And then the power went out. The house sank into darkness. Asterisk. The silence inside the storm power outage brought with it a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful, not calm. It was the silence that comes when the world holds its breath before something breaks. Sundar stood in the kitchen, his phone screen now the only light in the room. The envelope with the forged documents still sat on the table like a wound left open. Upstairs, Kavya was asleep. The house felt fragile, like even the air had gone. Still, waiting to see what he would do next, Anjali lit a candle in the living room and placed it on the table. Her hand steady even though her face told a different story. She looked at Sundar for a long moment, as if trying to read something in his expression that he himself hadn't figured out yet. Do you trust him? She asked quietly, nodding toward the envelope. Rajesh? Sundar shook his head. I used to. A long time ago, before this ... game. What game? He sat down slowly, his back aching, not from physical strain, but from the weight of everything pressing on him at once. He's been trying to climb over me for years. Not in the open. Not where people could see it. Small things. Quiet rumors. Missed meetings that suddenly got blamed on me. He's smart. Dangerous. And now I think he's behind the leak. But he's careful. He never leaves fingerprints. Anjali walked over and sat across from him. The candle flickered between them, casting shadows on the wall. Then what's his endgame? Sundar exhaled deeply. He wants me out, quietly, to make it look like I chose to step down. He keeps his hands clean, takes credit for stability, and if I speak out, he has these documents to make me look like I was covering something up. Anjali didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. This wasn't just about a company anymore. It was about dignity, about family, about the truth. What we do? She asked. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. I don't know. He stood up suddenly and walked over to the window. The rain had slowed, but the wind still moved through the trees like a whisper. He remembered his early days working late into the night, building code, dreaming of something bigger, not for power, not for money, just for the joy of making something that helped people. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. The stakes had grown. The world had gotten louder, faster, more ruthless. And now it had come to this. His phone buzzed again. A new message. This time from someone unexpected. We need to meet. I have something you need to see. Don't tell anyone. I stared at it. The initial wasn't signed, but he knew exactly who it was. Amit Desa, one of his closest advisors. Someone who had worked beside him for years through successes and stumbles. and someone who had suddenly taken an extended leave 2 weeks ago without giving a reason. Now, he was reaching out. Anjali leaned over and read the message. Are you going to meet him? I have to. Tonight? Yes? Do you trust him? I want to. She nodded slowly, then said something she hadn't said in a long time. Just promise me. You'll come back, not as the CEO, not as the public figure. Just ... come back as my husband, as Kavya's father. He paused. Then nodded. He grabbed a jacket, slid the envelope into his backpack, and stepped into the night. The roads were slick and dark. His car moved slowly, the headlights cutting through fog. Amit's message had included a location, a quiet diner on the edge of town, one that stayed open all night for long-haul drivers and lonely travelers. Sundar had never been there before. It felt like the kind of place where secrets could breathe, without being heard. He walked in and spotted Amy in a corner booth. He looked older than Sundar remembered, tired, like a man who had been running from something he couldn't name. Thanks for coming, Amit said, gesturing for him to sit. What is this about? Sundar asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Amit slid a small black flash drive across the table. Watch what's on this, but not here. Somewhere safe. It's everything. Everything. The leak, the forged documents, the people involved, recordings, emails, even video footage. It's all on there. I was investigating it before I left. They were getting close to me, so I backed off, but I couldn't just walk away. Sundar stared at the drive. Why give this to me now? Because I believe in what you built, and because I know what they'll do to your family if you don't walk away quietly. You're not just fighting for a company, Sundar. You're fighting for your name. Who else knows? Amit shook his head. Just me. And now you. Sundar reached for the flash drive, but Amit placed a hand over his. Once you watch this, everything changes. They won't let you stay silent. But if you expose them, you become the threat. Are you ready for that? Sundar didn't answer. His thoughts were loud, tangled, but something in him was starting to wake up. Not the public figure, not the CEO, but the man who once left India, with nothing but hope and belief and hard work. The man who believed in truth. He slipped the flash drive into his pocket, stood, and nodded once. I'll decide tonight. Amit nodded back. Be careful. Sundar left the diner and stepped back into the cold. The air had changed, lighter, but sharper. The storm was passing, but something told him a bigger one was on the horizon. When he returned home, the house was dark and quiet. He walked past, the envelope still sitting on the table, and climbed the stairs. He paused by Kavya's door, listened to her breathing. Then he entered his study and locked the door. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop. And what he saw in the first few seconds made his heart stop. Asterisk truth in the dark room was quiet. The kind of quiet that made even small sounds feel enormous. The low hum of the laptop, the faint rustle of the trees outside, the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath Sundar's feet. But none of that could compete with the noise building inside his mind. He stared at the laptop screen, the first video already playing. His own face appeared, sitting at the head of a conference table. The footage was grainy, clearly recorded without consent, probably through a hidden device. Sundar blinked. He didn't remember this meeting. Not like this. But then he realized it had been edited, cut in a way that twisted his words. Someone had taken routine strategy discussions and spliced them with voiceovers and fabricated lines to make. It looked like he was orchestrating layoffs behind the board's back. It painted him as deceptive, careless, manipulative. His breath caught. He clicked on the next file. This time, it was an email thread. The sender's name, Sundar Pichai, but the writing wasn't his. The tone, the phrasing, none of it matched how he spoke or wrote. It was subtle, but he knew. The messages were cleverly created, blaming certain executives for failed product launches, suggesting financial misreporting, and calling for the quiet removal of several department heads. Emails that would destroy reputations, that would shatter trust, and they were all signed with his name. He moved to the third file, A recording. Audio only, he pressed play. He's too focused on the optics, a familiar voice said. It was Rayesh, calm, sharp, full of disdain. He's too cautious. He hesitates. And when a man in his position hesitates, someone else needs to make the decisions for him. Another voice joined. It took Sundar a moment to place it. Nii Arjade Bat, head of strategy. One of the people Sundar had trusted most. He won't step down unless we give him a reason to, Niraj said. A reason the board can't ignore. That's why we plant the doubts, Rayesh replied. Make it look like he's slipping. Like he's losing grip. We make the choice for him. The audio ended. Sundar leaned back in his chair, his chest tight. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. And the rest of the files, still unopened, were likely more of the same. Recordings, fake messages, edited meetings. All carefully crafted to dismantle him piece by piece. He sat there for a long time, unmoving. He thought about Kavya. How she had told him she felt invisible. How he had almost missed the signs because he was too caught up in work. Now, as he stared into the digital shadows of betrayal, he realized that even in the company he had given everything to, he had been slowly made invisible to Dot. It wasn't just about being CEO anymore. This was about dignity, about truth, about being a father who could look his daughter in the eye and say, I did not stay silent. He shut the laptop and tucked the flash drive back into its case. Then, quietly, he opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was still. He passed by Kavya's room again, paused. Her door was slightly open now, and he could hear the soft sound of her drawing pencil scratching paper in slow, thoughtful lines. He didn't want to interrupt. Not tonight. Anjali was waiting in the kitchen. She didn't ask anything when she saw him. Just poured him a glass of water and waited. Double quotes, I know who's behind it, Sundar said. Rayesh. And he's working with Niraj. They forged emails, fake recordings, even meetings. They're planning to remove me. And they almost did. Anjali set the glass down gently. Asterisk. What are you going to do? He looked at her, not as the man who wore the pressure of thousands of employees, but as a husband, a father, a person who still believed that truth, however painful, mattered. Asterisk. I'm going to tell the board, he said. Everything. Show them what I found, even if it costs me my job. I won't leave in shame. And I won't stay quiet to protect men who destroy others in the dark. Anjali's eyes filled with something. Between worry and pride, they might turn on you, she whispered. They might not believe you. Then let them. But at least I'll still believe in myself. The next morning, he sent a private message to the chair of the board. Requested. An emergency session? Shared only one sentence. I have evidence of internal sabotage and forgery. It concerns 2 of our senior executives. The meeting was set for that afternoon. The hours crawled by. Sundar stayed home, pacing between rooms, checking on Kavya. Responding to a few messages from work without emotion. No one knew what was coming. Not yet. But the storm had already started to move. When he finally arrived at the headquarters later that day, the air in the building felt electric. A quiet buzz of whispers followed him down the halls. People had heard things. Vague rumors. Someone had leaked just enough to stir tension. The boardroom was half full when he entered. All eyes turned to him. He walked in slowly. Calm. Steady. A man who knew his truth. Even if others did, single quotes as he took his seat. Rayesh entered from the other side of the room. He smiled faintly at Sundar. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. Niraj was right behind him, holding a tablet, pretending to check his notes. Neither looked nervous. The chair of the board cleared his throat. Mr. Pichai, we're here to hear. What you found. Please proceed. Sundar plugged the flash drive into the screen projector. What followed was 28 minutes of footage. Recordings, emails, and silence. No one interrupted. No one spoke. When the final video faded, Sundar looked around the table. I've made mistakes, he said. But I never compromised this company. I never lied to you. And I will not stay. silent while others try to destroy what we built. You may decide to replace me. That's your right. But it won't be because I walked away in shame. It'll be because I stood up for the truth. The room was still. Eyes shifted. Papers rustled. Some board members looked away. Others nodded faintly. Rayesh stood up. This is a distraction, he said. Fabricated. Strategically released. I don't know where this came from, but it's not real. It is. A voice interrupted. Everyone turned. Amit had entered the room. His eyes locked on Rayesh. And you know it? Rayesh's face shifted. Just slightly. But in that moment, everything changed. The silence broke. Asterisk, the weight of the truth. Room shifted like a living thing. It was silent. But not calm. Not anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes after a window shatters. When everyone holds their breath, waiting to see what comes through the broken glass. Amit stood at the back of the boardroom. His coat still damp from the rain, his eyes fixed on Rayesh. He looked like a man who had been carrying a secret for far too long and was finally letting it go. Sundar watched him, still seated, feeling the full gravity of what was unfolding. For weeks he had felt something beneath the surface, betrayal. Whispers, plots in dark corners. But now, the lies weren't shadows anymore. They were exposed, raw, trembling in the open. Rayesh didn't move, didn't flinch. But his jaw was tight, and the mask he always wore, the perfect executive, the calm strategist, was beginning to crack. Neeraj shifted uncomfortably beside him, eyes flicking between faces, calculating which way the wind was turning. I was part of the investigation team, Amit said, voice low but clear. Before I left, I was reviewing internal digital logs, access histories, project authorizations. I found anomalies, patterns that didn't make sense, files opened by accounts that hadn't been active in months, approvals tied to Sundar's name on days he wasn't even in the country. He walked slowly toward the table. The board members turned in their seats, watching him like they were seeing him for the first time. At first, I thought it was just poor security, he continued. But then I found emails. Logs of data being sent to external servers. Videos spliced to create false narratives. And each trail ended in a dead end, unless you looked deeper. Unless you knew where to look. Amit reached into his bag and pulled out a folder, thick, worn, filled with printed evidence. I brought copies, he said. I knew there would be questions. Rayesh finally spoke, voice sharp but steady. This is ridiculous. If you found something suspicious, why? Bring it here? Why not raise it through internal security? I did, Amit said. But the files disappeared. Days after I flagged them, the access logs were wiped. And then I received an anonymous tip that my position was being reevaluated. Sundar saw it now. The moment of fear in Rayesh's eyes, a flicker, quick, but there, you tried to bury me, Amit said. But I didn't come here to save myself. I came here to protect the truth. Because if someone like Sundar, who gave his life to this company, can be framed and erased this easily, then no one here is safe. The chair of the board leaned forward slowly. Rayesh, he said, voice calm but cold, we'll need you and Neeraj to step outside. Now. Neeraj looked like he wanted to speak, to explain, but he didn't. He followed Rayesh out of the room, the door clicking shut behind them. What followed was not loud. It was quiet, methodical. The board examined the files, asked questions, reviewed timestamps, listened again to the recordings, watched the doctored videos. By the time the clock hit 2 hours later, the room felt different. Like it had shed something heavy, something toxic. Sundar didn't speak much after that. He let the evidence carry the weight. But when it was over, he stood again. I don't want revenge, he said. I don't want drama. I want to go home tonight and look my daughter in the eye, knowing I didn't lose myself in all of this. I want to protect this company, even if it means stepping aside, but not like this. Not through lies. The chair looked around the table. One by one, each board member gave a small nod. We believe you, she said, and with that, it was done. Asterisk, asterisk. Outside, the world felt strange. Sundar walked out of the building alone. No press waiting, no cameras. Just a pale sky stretched over him and the faint scent of rain still in the air. He stood for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the cold wind settle in his lungs. He didn't feel victorious. This wasn't triumph. This was survival. When he got home, the house was quiet again. He opened the door slowly, not wanting to wake anyone. But to his surprise, the living room lights were on. Angeli sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a book in her lap that she hadn't turned a page of. She looked up, eyes searching his face. And, without speaking, she stood and wrapped her arms around him. "You did it," she whispered. "I didn't win," he said. "But I didn't lose either." "No," she replied. "You chose the harder path. That's always the real win." He held her tighter. And then, softly, another voice joined them. "Dad." He turned. Kavya stood at the foot of the stairs, in her pajamas, hair messy, sketchbook still in one hand. "You're back." He nodded, stepping toward her. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "For the times I wasn't here. For not listening." She walked to him and hugged him, small arms wrapping around his waist. "You were here when it mattered," she whispered. The next morning. News broke. A quiet press release. No names mentioned. Just a line buried in the business section. Internal. Review clear CEO of misconduct following unfounded allegations. But inside the company, the truth moved differently. People talked. Respect returned. And while Rayesh and Niraj's departure was marked by silence, Sundar's presence felt different now. Not as a CEO above everyone, but as someone who had been through fire and came out the other side still whole. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, Sundar was on the porch, watching the sunset, when Kavya sat beside him. "Can I show you something?" she asked. He nodded. She opened her sketchbook. There, in pencil and soft colors, was a drawing of a tree, tall, old, with deep roots and branches reaching the sky. Beneath it stood a small family, and in the corner, a simple line of text. Strength doesn't always roar. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just reached out and held her hand. But somewhere far away, a message was being typed. Anonymous. Cold. Calculated. "We failed this time, but he'll fall. All it takes is the right moment." The game wasn't over. The choice that changed everything. Mornings had grown quieter. Weeks had passed since Sundar walked into that boardroom and laid everything bare. In that time, the world outside had barely noticed the war he'd fought. There were no headlines, no grand public victory, only silence. But sometimes silence is the loudest kind of peace. He had returned to his routine, but something was different. Now, not in the work. The meetings still came, the decisions still piled up, the inbox still overflowed. But in him, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in years, he had set a boundary. Not to protect his position, but to protect what mattered most. And that decision had cost him something. Yet it had also given him back a part of himself that he hadn't realized was slipping away. On a Thursday afternoon, he stood in front of a window at headquarters, looking out at the city. Below, people moved like small, focused shadows, chasing goals, chasing time, chasing something. He understood. He'd lived it, but today, he didn't feel the same pull. The world hadn't slowed down, but he had. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. It was the chair of the board. "They're ready for you," she said gently. He nodded, taking a final look outside before turning toward the conference room. This time, the atmosphere felt still. Not cold, but expectant. As he entered, the room quieted. Around the table sat the people who had once doubted him, once questioned his silence. They looked at him now with something new in their eyes, not just respect, but understanding. He had shown them what it looked like to lead without shouting, to hold your ground without becoming hard. And now they were waiting. The chair spoke. "First, we've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing everything," she began. "Not just the investigation, but the culture it exposed. The weaknesses, the fractures. We can't deny that something's been broken for a long time. We've asked ourselves difficult questions. And we've come to a decision, Sundar said. Nothing. He didn't want to fill the space. He wanted to hear it fully. We'd like you to stay, she continued. Not because of your title, not because of your history, but because you reminded us why this company exists. You reminded? U.S. that power means nothing if it doesn't serve people. You reminded us of humility. And strength. He looked at them one by one. Some were nodding. Some just held his gaze. But they all seemed sincere. Thank you. He said quietly, but before I say yes, there's something I need to share. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded letter. This is my resignation. A wave of confusion passed through the room. He placed it on the table. Not effective immediately, he said. I'm not walking away. Not yet, but I need to plan my departure on my terms. With dignity? With intention? Not because I'm tired, but because I know what matters now. I have a daughter who almost disappeared in front of me. A wife who carried more than she should have. And a life I've barely lived outside these walls. He let the silence settle. Want to help find and prepare the next leader? Not a copy of me. Not another figurehead. Someone better. Someone bolder. Someone who understands that the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more clarity. The chair leaned back clearly. Moved. Are you sure? He smiled gently. I've never been more sure. Asterisk, asterisk, later that evening, he sat on the edge of Kavya's bed, watching her draw again. Her sketchbook was almost full now, pages layered with soft lines and careful color. She handed it to him quietly, almost shyly. You can keep this, she said. He opened it, flipping through the pages slowly. Each one was a moment captured. Trees, cityscapes, small faces drawn in silence. And then, near the end, a drawing of a tall building with glass windows. Inside, a man stood at the top floor, looking out. But behind him, drawn softly, was a girl holding his hand. Not in the drawing itself, but in its meaning. He saw what she was trying to say. I'm proud of you. He whispered. I'm proud of you too, she said. NJAL. I passed by the doorway, pausing for a moment to smile. The moment felt whole. Not perfect. But full. Asterisk, asterisk. A month later, Sundar sat on a panel at a global summit. The questions were the same as always: tech, innovation, ethics. But one journalist asked something different. You've led one of the most powerful companies in the world, she said. But if you could be remembered for one thing, just one, what would it be? Sundar paused. Then he smiled. That I was there when it mattered. The audience felt quiet, the kind of quiet that holds weight. And somewhere, watching from home, Kavya smiled too. Asterisk, asterisk, get far away. In a tall office filled with quiet tension. A phone rang. A voice on the other end answered. He's stepping down on his own terms, the caller said. But he's planning something before he leaves. He's not done yet. A pause. Then the voice replied. Then we're not either. Asterisk, asterisk, because the real battles don't always end with applause. They end with choices, quiet ones. But those are the choices that change everything. Asterisk.